The sky tore open with a deafening roar. A massive black shape cut through the clouds, its hull gleaming like dark glass under the pale sun. Below, Earth trembled beneath the impact. Buildings crumbled. Streets cracked wide open as a shock wave of energy surged out from the alien ship, flattening everything in its path. For a moment, there was silence, an eerie stillness that hung heavy, a moment where humanity's fate seemed suspended in the air. Then, the message came. Surrender, or face annihilation. The voice was cold, metallic, and not one of their own. Humanity didn't need to be told twice. The invaders, tall and imposing, armed with weapons beyond anything Earth had seen, were here. And they weren't asking. They were demanding. Captain Noah Pierce stood in the wreckage of the ruined city, the scent of burning wood and broken concrete hanging thick in the air. His face was grim, eyes scanning the horizon where the alien ship hovered ominously, casting an impossibly long shadow. The message had been broadcast to every human city. Earth had become a battlefield. We can't just give up, Lena Martinez's voice broke through the chaos. The words were harsh, resolute. She stood beside Noah, her hair wild, her gaze never leaving the sky. Her body was still coated in the dust of their last skirmish. We need to fight. Noah clenched his fists, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. A war. A real war. The kind of conflict no one on Earth had ever expected. Humanity, unprepared for the might of such an advanced force, was outmatched. The human resistance, the last bastion of survival, was barely holding on. I'm not giving up, Noah said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering as he met Lena's eyes. He wasn't a man who'd ever run from a fight, but this was different. These aliens weren't just invaders, they were a force of nature, an unstoppable tide. We don't have a choice, Lena retorted, her jaw set, eyes fierce. Look around you. This isn't just a fight for Earth anymore. It's a fight for survival. For everything we are. For our families, our homes. A tremor ran through the ground as the alien ships unleashed another wave of destructive power. The sky lit up with fiery explosions from the distant military forces trying and failing to push back. Noah's thoughts raced as the scope of the situation began to sink in. The war had begun. And it was no longer just about winning, it was about staying alive. We've lost so much already, he murmured, eyes cast down at the smoldering rubble at his feet. But we haven't lost everything yet. Not if we fight. Lena nodded, her face hardening. There was no room for doubt now. We'll need every soldier, every willing hand. And we'll need a plan. A low hum signaled the arrival of more alien forces, additional ships dropped from the sky, their lights pulsing ominously. In the distance, the city's survivors were already scattering, evacuating or hiding in whatever shelter they could find. What's the plan? Lena asked, stepping closer, her voice more urgent now. Noah hesitated, then reached for the worn map of the city that lay in his bag. We're not going to win this fight head-on. We've got to hit them where it hurts. Disrupt their supply lines, sabotage their tech. We need to cripple their systems, make them think twice about taking us. Lena raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. You're talking about guerrilla warfare. You're serious? I am, Noah said. This isn't about power. It's about strategy. We fight smarter, not harder. Before Lena could respond, the ground shook again. The aliens had begun to advance on their position, their ships lowering closer to the surface. Noah could see the mechanical walkers moving into formation, massive and terrifying, each step like a hammer strike on the earth. We don't have much time, Lena said, voice taut with tension. She looked toward the others, the remnants of humanity's last resistance. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they weren't backing down. Noah took a deep breath and stood taller. I know we're not ready for this. But we have no choice. They want to take our home. And we're not letting them. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line, the same defiance that burned in Noah's chest flickering in her eyes. Then let's make them regret it. With a sharp nod, Noah began to lead the small group of survivors towards their underground hideout. They'd need to regroup, plan their next moves carefully, and most importantly, they needed to stay alive long enough to show the invaders that humanity was not so easily conquered. As the group moved through the remnants of the city, a chilling realization settled in Noah's gut. The invaders were here. And no matter how many battles they fought, they would never be the same. But one thing was certain, they had a home to protect. And if they were going to survive, they would have to roar like never before. The distant hum of alien ships echoed through the underground tunnel like a cold, persistent whisper. The thick concrete walls of the resistance base barely muffled the sound. Noah Pierce, standing before a hastily drawn map of the city, stared at the lines marking alien patrol routes and critical infrastructure. Sweat trickled down his temple, but it wasn't the heat. It was the pressure. The aliens had already set up blockade zones, and every second that passed brought them closer to finding their underground hideout. Ready for this? Lena Martinez's voice broke through his focus. Her tone was tight, laced with determination. Noah didn't answer immediately. His fingers traced the lines on the map again, the same ones he had been studying for hours. His mind raced. Could they pull it off? Could they strike the aliens hard enough to make them falter? They had no choice. Yeah, Noah finally said, his voice a low rasp. He folded the map and tucked it into his jacket. It's now or never. Lena didn't reply, but the look in her eyes said it all. She didn't need him to tell her what this meant. She knew as well as he did that every mission now could be their last. The hope of humanity rested on a knife's edge, balanced between a risky counterattack and the reality of their dwindling numbers. The resistance had only a handful of fighters left. Most of the civilians had been evacuated, but many were still trapped in the alien-controlled zones. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. If they were going to strike, it had to be today. Noah glanced around the base. The tired faces of the other resistance fighters stared back at him, each one as determined as the next, but each one also bracing for the worst. They all knew this wasn't just about fighting for their homes anymore. This was about the survival of the human race. Their race. He stepped toward the small group of fighters, each one sitting in a cluster around various weapons. He took a deep breath, the weight of his words heavy as he spoke. We hit them tonight. The alien supply base near the industrial district. Their tech is vulnerable there. We've mapped out their patrols, but the only way to do this is with speed. We strike hard, we get in and out. No mistakes. Lena moved beside him, her eyes flicking over to the rest of the group. We don't have the luxury of hesitation. Every minute we waste is another minute they get closer to discovering us. We need to hit them fast and leave them reeling. One of the fighters, a wiry man named Greg, raised his hand. And if things go south? His voice was thin with apprehension, but there was a fire in his gaze. What's the fallback? Noah's eyes met his, and for a moment, his gaze softened. There is no fallback. We fight or we die. That's the only option. The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of his words settled in. It wasn't a lie. There was no retreat left to take. They either won this battle or faced annihilation. The fighters gathered their gear, preparing for the mission. Noah turned to Lena, who was already checking her rifle, her fingers quick and sure as they moved over the weapon. She caught his gaze for a fleeting second, her expression unreadable. Lena, Noah said, his voice low, you're in charge of the tech team. I need you to disable their security systems. We can't risk them alerting reinforcements. She nodded, the sharpness of her gaze cutting through the tension. Understood. I'll handle it. Just make sure you don't get yourself killed out there. He smirked, though it was tinged with grim humor. You too. The moment stretched between them, a brief, unspoken understanding passing in the silence. Then, with a nod, Lena turned to assemble her team. Noah followed them, the heavy weight of his own responsibility pressing against him with every step. His heart thudded in his chest, the rhythm of war syncing with the pulse of the moment. His thoughts flickered to his family, his daughter, his wife. He hadn't heard from them in days. The thought of them, somewhere out there, in danger, gnawed at him. But there was no time for distractions. If he was going to lead these people, if he was going to give humanity a fighting chance, he couldn't afford to hesitate. The team moved through the shadowed streets of the ruined city, their footsteps muffled by the cracked asphalt. The alien ships hovered above, dark shapes against the sky. Their pulsing lights reminded Noah of the heartbeat of a predator, a quiet promise of violence that could come at any moment. As they approached the alien base, a sharp gust of wind swept through the streets, carrying the acrid scent of burning metal and smoke. The air felt thick, charged with tension. They were close now. Lena led the way with her team, silently cutting through the darkness. Noah stayed a few paces behind, watching the perimeter. Every shadow felt like a threat, every slight sound seemed like it could be an alien drone closing in on them. "We're in position," Lena's voice came over the comms, crisp and clear. "Cutting the security now." Noah signaled to the rest of the team. This was it. They had a small window of opportunity. If they didn't move fast, the aliens would retaliate before they could strike. And then, a flash of red light. The security grid flickered and died, leaving the base vulnerable. The fighters surged forward, weapons drawn. The battle had begun. Noah's heart raced as he dashed forward, adrenaline flooding his veins. There was no turning back now. This wasn't just a fight for Earth. This was a fight for everything. The roar of gunfire echoed through the night, and Noah felt the pulse of humanity's last stand in every shot fired. The hum of alien engines filled the air, a low, vibrating thrum that rattled the bones. It was only a matter of time before the invaders sent reinforcements. Noah Pierce could feel the weight of the impending storm as he crouched in the darkened alley, his pulse hammering in his ears. His team had barely made it through the first wave of their sabotage mission, and now they had one chance left to strike before the enemy closed in on them. "Ready?" Lena's voice crackled through his earpiece. Noah adjusted his grip on his rifle, keeping his movements smooth, measured. "We're ready. Move out." The narrow street was littered with debris, pieces of collapsed buildings and discarded wreckage from previous battles. The air tasted of smoke and burning metal. It smelled like Earth was dying. They'd sabotaged the alien base, but that was only part of their plan. Now, the real test began. They had to infiltrate the alien command center, locate their central AI core, and shut it down before the enemy could launch a counterattack. If they could sever the nerve center of the invaders' operations, they might stand a chance at throwing them off balance. Noah led the way, Lena and her tech team right behind him. He glanced back briefly. Her face was set in a determined mask, lips pressed into a thin line. She had always been the pragmatist, the one who focused on the cold calculations. And yet, Noah saw the flicker of something else in her eyes, something deeper, something human. They moved swiftly, keeping low, like shadows beneath the moonlit sky. The alien patrols had been temporarily disrupted by the earlier attack, but the invaders were relentless. They had no intention of letting humanity escape with even a sliver of hope. The team turned a corner, and there it was, an imposing structure of metal and alien geometry, its surface black and glistening like obsidian. The command center. "We're in position," Lena whispered into the comms. "No alien presence detected yet, but that won't last long." Noah's stomach twisted with unease. The feeling of being hunted never left, and the silence only heightened the tension. "We move fast. Take out any hostiles we encounter, but don't engage unless necessary. We need to reach that core." The door was massive, a single panel of alien alloy, reinforced with layers of energy shields. No human weapon could hope to penetrate it. But that wasn't their problem, Lena's team had the tools for this job. Lena stepped forward, a sleek device in her hand, and knelt before the door. "Cover me," she ordered. With quick, fluid movements, she connected the device to the panel and began typing into the screen. A series of flashing lights blinked across the interface as the door's security system began to override. Noah could hear the distant sound of footsteps echoing through the corridors of the alien structure. The clock was ticking. "I need another minute," Lena said, her voice strained. Noah nodded, his eyes darting around the darkened street. He was ready for anything. The team had trained for this. They had planned every move, anticipated every possible scenario. But that didn't stop the cold knot of fear in his chest. It was the unknown that gnawed at him, the uncertainty that came with fighting an enemy who never tired, who adapted faster than they could think. And then, a sharp screech echoed from within the building. A patrol had arrived. Lena's head snapped up. "We don't have time." The door's energy shields flickered, then died. She was in. "Noah, go!" Lena shouted. He didn't hesitate. They charged into the heart of the building, weapons raised, hearts pounding. The corridors were stark and white, unnervingly sterile, but the deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. It smelled like ozone and chemicals, the stench of technology run amok. The team moved swiftly, staying silent as shadows, each footstep calculated. They passed rows of alien consoles, and Noah could feel the weight of the command center's pulse. The core was close. His mind stayed sharp, focusing on the mission. Then came the sound they had all feared. A low, rumbling roar. The ground beneath their feet shook as the alien drones appeared from around a corner, their mechanical limbs clanking against the floor. Their red eyes glowed like a swarm of angry wasps, and they immediately locked onto the team. Lena fired first, her rifle blasting a drone out of the air before it even got the chance to raise its weapon. The rest of the team followed suit, unleashing a barrage of fire that sent sparks flying. But there were too many of them. More drones poured in from every direction, surrounding them. "Fall back!" Noah shouted, as another drone was blown to pieces by Lena's team. But there was no room to retreat. The drones were closing in from all sides. Noah's heart slammed in his chest, the tension so thick he could taste it. He reached for his detonator. "Lena, can you get to the core?" She nodded, her face set with determination. "Go. I'll handle it." Without thinking, Noah grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "No. We stick together." And then it came, the sound of the alien commander's voice. It echoed through the halls, the invaders' language harsh and metallic. They were preparing to fire. Noah looked at Lena, his mind made up. "We end this now." Lena's gaze hardened. "Together." With that, Noah charged, leading the way to the core room. There was no turning back. The hum of the alien command center was deafening, a deep, vibrating pulse that filled every inch of the steel and obsidian walls. Noah Pierce's breath came in short bursts, his lungs burning from the frenzied sprint through the winding halls. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes. His team was scattered, doing their best to clear the path, but the drones were relentless. The closer they got to the core, the more intense the fire became. Noah's mind raced. They had one shot at this. If they failed, the aliens would regroup and launch a counterattack that could wipe out what little resistance humanity had left. If they succeeded, if they reached the core, they might just be able to sever the aliens' connection to their forces and throw them into chaos. But time was slipping away, and the sound of approaching drones echoed louder. Lena's voice crackled through Noah's comms. "We're almost there. Just hold them off for a little longer." He could hear the tension in her voice, could feel the urgency in every word. It wasn't just the mission she was focused on. It was the survival of every human who had ever fought, bled, and lost for the chance to see another dawn. "We'll cover you," Noah called back. "Just make sure that core goes dark, no matter what." He took a deep breath and motioned to his team. They pressed forward, weapons raised, their eyes sharp as they swept the halls for incoming drones. The metallic smell of the alien ship was thick, mingling with the sharp scent of burning energy shields. It was the scent of battle, the stench of war. Noah's mind flashed back to the beginning of this war. The day the skies had been torn open, and alien ships had rained down across the world, overwhelming Earth's defenses in a matter of hours. Humanity hadn't been ready, hadn't even been aware of the scale of the threat. But they had fought. They had endured. And now, here they were, at the heart of the alien invasion, fighting to take back what was theirs. They reached a set of heavy blast doors, the final obstacle between them and the core room. Noah signaled for a halt, his heart pounding in his chest. The heavy door was lined with an energy field, no human tech could bypass it easily. But that's where Lena came in. A low buzz emanated from the device she had strapped to her wrist. She connected it to the interface beside the door, her fingers flying over the holographic screen as she worked with practiced precision. "We've got seconds," Lena said, her voice clipped. The sound of approaching drones was growing louder. Noah positioned himself next to the door, his rifle steady in his hands. "Hurry." Almost, Lena's voice broke off as the doors abruptly opened with a hiss, the energy field deactivating with a soft whine. Beyond it lay the core room, a cavernous chamber filled with glowing alien technology, whirring with life. The air inside was cold and sterile, the atmosphere thick with energy. Noah didn't hesitate. He signaled for his team to move in. They entered, weapons raised, scanning for any sign of danger. The core, a massive orb of pulsating light, sat in the center of the room, surrounded by cables and tendrils of alien technology. The walls hummed with the power of it, like the beating heart of the invaders' force. Lena moved toward the control panel, already working to initiate the shutdown sequence. But as she approached the console, the lights in the room shifted. A sudden chill swept through the air, the temperature dropping sharply as an ominous growl echoed from the far corner. A massive, armored figure emerged from the shadows. Its eyes were a glowing, angry red, and its movements were smooth, mechanical. The alien commander. Noah's heart skipped a beat. He'd known this was coming. They had no way to avoid it. The commander's hulking figure advanced toward them with terrifying speed, its weapon raised. The hum of its plasma rifle sent a shock of dread through Noah's veins. "Lena, now!" Noah shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Lena's hands were shaking as she typed furiously into the console, her face pale with concentration. Almost. The alien commander raised its rifle, aiming directly at Lena. Without thinking, Noah leaped forward, slamming into the alien before it could fire. The impact sent both of them sprawling to the ground. Sparks flew as they crashed into the cold floor, the alien commander roaring in fury. Noah scrambled to his feet, throwing a punch that landed squarely on the commander's faceplate. It barely flinched. But it gave Noah just enough time. He pulled a small grenade from his belt and hurled it into the alien's chest. The blast sent the commander tumbling backward, smoke billowing from its damaged armor. Lena hit the final key. The core flickered. The room went dark for a split second. Then, with a roar that shook the walls, the alien technology powering the base sputtered and died. The hum of the ship's engines fell silent. The aliens' forces, once invincible, were now disconnected. The resistance had won. Noah staggered to his feet, breathless, his chest heaving as he looked around the now still room. Lena was beside him, her face pale but determined. "We did it," she whispered. Noah smiled, though it felt strange, like a weight lifting from his shoulders. They had done it. They had beaten back the invaders, against all odds. And for the first time in a long while, Noah allowed himself to believe that humanity had a chance.